All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Jets Afterburners podcast special Wednesday episode coming to you. You know, it's that time of year. NFL draft season is here. It is the off season. So you already know that we got to get our boy Dom C on to sing some of that green gospel, talking draft. Dom C, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Liam, man. Thanks for having me on again, bro. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I think this is our third time or show, something like that.
Third or fourth, something like that.
Yeah,
I've never been on with Dan. I've never made a show. I've never made one of your shows and when he's been there.
Yeah, and I guess the streak continues now.
It's all good, man. It's all good. How you
we'll
doing?
Make it work one day. Doing good, man. Just staying busy. Always so much going on. But the New York Jets never stop. So it's always something going on there. We got let's say what's up to the chat real quick. Who do we got here? We got Johnny Boy in the house. We got Matthias, the backup co-host Armand. We got Afferman. Who else do we got here? All right, yeah, we got James. All right, so as the chat continues, let's dive right into it, man. So, I guess just starting off at the off season, just want to get your thoughts real quick. What are your thoughts on the coaching staff, Aaron Glenn, Muji? For a lot of players and a lot of people, they didn't want a first-time head coach, along with a first-time general manager in a rookie coaching staff. I personally think Aaron Glenn's the right guy for the job. What do you think?
I will say this. Excuse me. I was absolutely on. Excuse me. I get the hiccups. I was absolutely on board with getting an offensive mind in, just to, if nothing more, Liam, just to kind of change it up and break the monotony of what we've just repeated the same thing over and over. And yet here we are. We repeated the same exact thing over and over. First time head coach, first time GM, first time coordinator. A little bit of reprieve on the back end on the defense because Steve Wilkes has some experience, so on and so forth. But so, it was a little, for me, it was a little bit lackluster. I've liked so far, just some of the stuff, I like the no nonsense crap that Aaron Glenn doesn't seem like he's going to put up with. He's pretty straightforward, pretty direct. I love how he puts the beat in their place when they ask him a stupid question. That's always fun.
It's a nice change of pace too, from Saleh, that was everybody's best friend, where Aaron Glenn, he's going to call you out, I think it might have been Rich Cimini. One of them, I don't remember, I was trying to listen to their voices. It's hard to hear because they never put mics on the media.
Yeah.
But one of them asked him the same question. He goes, I've already answered this question, but I guess I will again, so I kind of like the grouchiness, it just reminds me of a football coach, no nonsense. We don't have time. Every second counts. My old football coach used to say time is our biggest enemy. And, he's right. He's got a job to do. So I do like Aaron Glenn. And I feel like if it were to be a first-time guy, I'm glad it is him. And if you remember that fake spike came against him, so he has a lot of unfinished business. And you just get the feeling that you're getting a pissed off head coach, he has to, he has a lot of points to prove. And I think he's going to do it, man.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, at least we'll see it for 2 or 3 years at minimum. I guess we'll figure out. There's no real expectations this year. I think we'll see what these guys are made of in year 2 and 3. If Muji can build the roster the right way, and if Glenn can get the most out of these players, and really, looks like they're bringing in the guys that they want in here, guys that, are, high upside guys, high floor, high upside, see if they can be, foundation pieces for the next couple of years, because, there's a big mess to clean up, this year. The roster was old. There was a lot of voided contract, like a lot of contracts voided out, and a lot of holes to fill. It's just not something that you can do in one off season. So
no, absolutely not. And we're feeling the aftermath now of going all in. Had this worked out, a deep playoff run, we were all saying Super Bowl last year. Let's not kid ourselves. So if that were the case, we'd be all cool with it, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that we only got 5 wins, and you know how crazy it sounds that we got 5 wins with Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, Garrett. It's insane. But I don't want to keep touching on the past. We all know the past. So yeah, you'd kind of spoken on what Muji and Glenn guys are. And let's be honest, there's been a lot of underwhelming signings. I mean, I like Cisco. I like Fields. The Woody Johnson comments pissed me off the other day. Just listening. Oh yeah, we always love Fields, this and that. I'm like, you guys could have drafted him.
Yeah, that's true.
Fine.
Yeah, that's really, really fair point.
But to be fair, it probably wouldn't have worked out. I'm sure Saleh would have failed him, and we'd be talking about bringing in Zach Wilson right now. So I guess hindsight's 2020. But like I said, I do like Cisco. I think him and Justin Fields are probably the 2 biggest signings so far. A lot of guys that I don't know much about. I don't think many people do. Stevens is coming off of a really bad season. We got the wide receiver in the room, a couple other players. So just looking at this free agency class so far, what are your thoughts on that?
Not very exciting, but I didn't expect it to. I expected him to shop on the, at the dollar store as opposed to Saks Fifth Avenue. I didn't expect a lot of big names. They filled pieces. They got young.
Yes.
They filled pieces and they got young. And there's still a lot of work to do. So all in all, I think it's still to be determined on really the end result. I don't think we can, outside of the re-signing of Sherwood and bringing in Cisco, there wasn't a lot to really write home about, if we're being honest.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to be 100% transparent, the Jets aren't in position to be going out and getting that huge, big splash signing. They're really not. Like last year was that year, like when we were all pumped when they went out and got Tyron Smith and those kind of guys. But the Jets, like you said, they got young. I have a feeling that we're just gonna be a young, under the radar, scrappy group. We're not gonna have the national media all over us. We're probably not gonna be in a ton of primetime games this year like we've been in the last couple of years. And that's really the way that Aaron Glenn likes it. And he even came out and said, I like moving in silence.
Yeah.
Are you a fan of this approach too? That we're not all over ESPN every day. And
I think it's much better that way, to be honest with you.
And that's really how you surprise guys too. You could surprise a lot of teams that coming out of the gate. Oh, we haven't really heard of about the Jets all off season. They're coming out and maybe winning some games early on.
Yeah.
And we could all agree that it's going to take about 2 to 3 years to find out if Aaron Glenn is a successful head coach. But you're going to know in the first game whether or not he's a legit head coach. And the way that you tell that is by penalties, body language. We're not going to have the most expensive bald cheerleader running up and down the sidelines. We're going to have a real CEO type guy. And it's going to tell, like I said, it's going to tell with the mistakes getting cleaned up, the penalties getting cleaned up. That's when we're going to know that we have a real head coach on our hands.
And time will tell.
Of course.
He's going to hit some bumps in the roads. The roster's really still incomplete, and it will be incomplete after the draft. It's not going to be the finished product. I think we have to kind of set our expectations kind of low in 2025 and see if you find some foundational pieces in this draft, and then you can build on them in 2026.
Yeah. So just getting into the draft here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said, there is a lot of holes, and we don't have a ton of picks right now.
Well, we got 8. I mean, it's not. 8. It's not. Yeah, we have.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. Like what the 49ers have or anything like that. But I know that there was something going on with the 3rd round pick, I believe it was, where we all had it wrong for a while, and it came out that it's like 20 spots.
Yeah, the media had it wrong too.
The media did, yeah. So just looking at what we have here, well, I guess a lot of people are saying it's not the most stellar of draft classes. Just looking back at years prior, where do you think this draft class compares? I know it's very early on, but just looking at prospects now compared to,
Well,
a couple years prior, what do you think?
I think so. I don't know if it's not it's not a weak draft class. I mean, last year's was an anomaly. I think last year's was a very very good draft class. The thing with this class, Lim, is that it's not very top heavy, right? The meat and potatoes of this class happens between like picks 20 and 60. That's where the real good value is for players, as opposed to last year where the top 15 or top 20 were all, actually, if you look back at last year's draft, there was so many hits in the first round. It was a really, really strong top heavy class. It's not like that this year. There's certain position groups. The running backs are really, really good. The defensive linemen, both at tackle and edge, really, really deep. The tight ends, really, really deep. And then there's, the wide receivers the wide receiver class is nowhere near where it was last year. Last year was the tackle class, the offense tackle class, nowhere near where it was last year. Quarterbacks, obviously, not even, remotely close to what it was last year. So, and you think about the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, like, what did we have? 6 of those all out of the top 10, maybe even more last year, between 7 between quarterbacks and wide receivers. You might not even, a wide receiver, there's a possibility you don't see one in the top 15.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. So just getting into wide receiver a little bit, do you see the Jets being a serious contender for Tet at 7? He does seem to be like the best receiver in the draft so far. I mean, by all reports.
he's my highest rated receiver. I got 3 guys that I think are a tier above the rest. But I don't know, man. I just don't know. I mean, I guess he's going to be in the discussion. I mean, I know that they've, spent a lot of time during the season scouting a lot. They were at, on record at 5 different Arizona games. Now, one could say they're, there to see Tet play. There's other guys on the Arizona team that they have shown some interest in as well. So it could have been multiple guys, but you think if you kind of, try to connect the dots that they would, he would be in play at 7 because of such a gaping hole that we have in the wide receiver room, but the bigger question is that, with Justin Fields at the helm now and Aaron Glenn saying on numerous occasions now, they're going to want to, enforce their will and run the ball. How important is that wide receiver too? Is it something that you have to spend a top 10 capital on, even if the guy is a borderline, top half of the first round talent like that McMillan? Right. I'm just not sure. So if I had to make a guess, I'd probably say there's other positions and other players that they're going to probably prioritize over Tet McMillan.
That makes sense, but he does have a skill set right now that the Jets don't have. He is that big 50-50 ball guy.
Oh yeah. He compliments Garrett really well too.
He really does. If you want to call Allen Lazard a big body receiver, I don't really consider him to be that. Do you see him being on the team in 2025 going into the season?
2 weeks ago I would have said not a chance. Today I think there's a little bit more of a chance. I think we'll know after the draft is done at the end of April on where they really stand with Allen Lazard. If they don't address the wide receiver room, or maybe take a stab on like a day 3 guy or something like that, there's a better chance that he stays on the roster. But if they spend some capital, if they bring some guys in, if they sign some free agents, which free agency is far from done, there's still guys that are going to be signed. They might just be waiting until June 2nd where they can cut him and recoup $12 million of that money to use this year. So I'd say right now it's a coin flip. It's a coin flip. Yeah. And I think it's that 50-50 wasn't, it was probably like 70-30 that he was gone 2 weeks ago for me. Now it seems to be like maybe there's a chance. I don't know.
It is.
I wouldn't be upset. I mean, I know
I wouldn't either.
I know, and I'm in the minority in that. Like, he's, he is valuable as a, as a blocker on the perimeter and at the second level. He's, we know how unreliable or inconsistent his hands are. But again, you're not going to be throwing the ball 30, 40 times a game. So, if he can get you, 40 catches for 600 yards and a couple touchdowns and give you some good run blocking when he's in the game, like, it's not the worst thing in the world. I don't think to have him on the roster.
Yeah, I think you could definitely do worse than Allen Lazard.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like he does. It seems like he only flourishes when Aaron Rodgers is throwing him the ball. But yeah, like that's the thing here. He is an expensive blocker. I would personally try to restructure his contract. Do you think that's definitely in play?
I don't think he's going to be playing for the Jets at the number he's at now. So
right.
I think if he's on the roster, they might ask him to take a pay cut. Or they just, like I said, they could move on from him on June 2nd and recoup $12 million that they can use this year if they wanted to, or have in the bank for this year if they wanted to.
And I know a lot of fans are pissed, going back to 2023 when he was he pretty much quit on the team, and that's exactly what he did. You could tell his heart wasn't in it. He was kicking soccer balls on the sideline. He was a healthy scratch, towards the end of the season. But I would like to think that's more of a product of Saleh, where the patients are in the asylum compared to, like, I don't think Aaron Glenn's going to put up with that.
Yeah.
He's going to go up to that soccer ball and pop it. Like, if he tries that. I really believe that. So do you think that he could possibly be more effective under Aaron Glenn with, like, more of a strict leader?
I don't know, man.
It's so hard
to tell. It's so hard to tell. I can't really. I haven't been able to get a vibe on him. Is he just really a Rodgers crony, and does he care to be here if Rodgers not here, or if is it is he willing to soak it up and know and accept his role and move on? I have no idea.
Yeah, I really didn't plan on asking you 5 minutes worth of Allen Lazard questions tonight.
All good.
But so getting back to the draft here a little bit.
Yeah.
You had touched on the offensive and defensive linemen. One of the names that keeps getting circulated around, I wouldn't be totally upset, is obviously Armand Membou at 7. And people say, like, he really does complete that offensive line. Now, on paper, this is one of the best offensive line classes or squads, I should say, that we've had in years, where really the only weak spot would be that right tackle. Now, do you feel like it's better off for the Jets to, like you said, a team that wants to run the ball, go up, get Membou at 7 and really solidify that offensive line? Or do you maybe keep right tackle, maybe that weak spot a little bit, where, like, maybe if you have to throw in Max Mitchell or, somebody like that, or
well, they did sign Chidi Okorafor, who has experience. Yeah, who has experience, starting for Pittsburgh, as a, league average player, nothing crazy. They signed him cheap, so they signed him the backup money. But yeah, I don't know. So first off, I think we have to, what the one thing that people always glance over is there's no guarantee that Membou is going to be there at 7, right?
That's a good point too.
The Patriots at 4 could clearly just snag him to fill one of their tackle spots that they have open. They signed Morgan Moses. I expect Morgan Moses to be the right tackle, but maybe they want to put Morgan Moses over at left and bring Membou in and let him play right. I don't know. So I think that has to be, understood, that there's no guarantee that he's going to be on the board. And then there's the argument: do you spend another top 10 pick on the offensive line? And people really, really feel passionate one way or the other about that. Me personally, I think as long as it's offense, I'd be fine. I don't know if Membou is my first choice at 7. He's not my favorite offensive lineman in the class. He graded out as my second, but that's not saying I would take my first tackle over him because my first tackle is just a pure left tackle. Regardless, I don't know. I like the guys in that next tier of tackles, so I would rather go weapon, whether it's a Tet McMillan, a Mecca Buka, a Tyler Warren, or something like that in round 1, and then come back in round 2 or 3 and use one of those picks on a tackle where I think you find value. I think the value is a lot better. It kind of meshes up better, and those guys can still come in and challenge to start right away.
Yeah, and that's the player that I really want to get into, Tyler Warren. Personally, he's my personal favorite at 7. I just feel like he brings like such a, he brings that attitude that Aaron Glenn's going to want to instill, like that no BS attitude. Give me the ball. We're going to go out there. We're going to score. We're going to hit you hard. He's everybody that, like, he's what you want attitude-wise in a player. And right now, the tight end position is very barren for the New York Jets.
Yeah.
It's not a sexy pick. See, like, in my opinion, I value tight ends and running backs. Everyone says you can't take them in the first round. The hell you can't. If he's a playmaker and if he's gonna change the game in a positive way for you, and it's a hole, why not? If he's the guy you like, why not?
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this draft is so weird. There's no real, outside of maybe Abdul Carter, Cam Ward, and Tyler and Travis Hunter, who we know are going to go in the top 3. Right. The rest of it is kind of, it's a mixed bag on who's going to go where or whatnot. It's just not a very top heavy draft. So, people who are steadfast that you can't take a tight end that high. Well, if you only have 10 or 11 first round draft grades, which a lot of NFL teams will end up with, and Tyler Warren's one of them, then go get your guy. You can't it's apples to oranges if you try to compare draft classes between the years, right? Because what might have been a strength last year might be a real weakness this year, and vice versa.
Right, and it's not like, oh, you can't do it for the culture. It's like you said, it's year to year. Yeah. And now, a lot of arguments to that is, oh well, if you draft him at 7, he better have Brock Bowers' production. I think that is so unfair.
Yeah,
you can't expect
they're different players, man.
Right, and you can't expect, you can't compare the guy to the player that just had the greatest tight end rookie season of all time. Like, I just don't think that's fair. Now, me and Dan went back and forth last week about this, and Dan said, yes, you absolutely can. If you're drafting him at 7, he better be that good. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I think it's apples and oranges, right? First off, they're 2 completely different players, right? Mm-hmm. Their skill sets are different. The expectations are going to be different. They're coming out in different, points of their career. Tyler Warren's 23 years old, has played, 4 full seasons,
right?
Where Bowers was just turned 21 and only played really 2 because he was hurt for most of 1. So there's that. The skill sets are different, I think Bowers. Bowers is definitely more dynamic, especially in the pass game. Whereas Tyler Warren's a guy who's going to, Tyler Warren's very, very underrated as an athlete. He's really super athletic, but he's a guy that's going to kill you. He's a kill you with 1,000 paper cuts kind of guy. He'll make a big play and he'll make a big splash play. Absolutely, he's got that in him, but he's more of a guy that's going to, just kind of just like lull you to sleep with 4-yard catches, 5-yard catches, like all that kind of stuff. I think that you said it well before, that he plays hard. He's got that dog mentality, which you love. Mm-hmm. I'd say he's he blocks with intent. I don't think he's a perfect blocker. I don't think he's the best blocker that we've ever seen at the position. I think that's on par, probably maybe a hair better from an inline, from that inline spot than Brock Bowers is. But Brock Bowers, they're different type of athletes when it comes to being receivers or pass catchers, right?
Sure.
Brock Bowers a lot more dynamic. He sinks, and he's much more of a nuanced route runner than Warren is. Warren will find the open spot. He knows how to get open, and like I said, he'll kill you with 1,000 paper cuts more so than one swift swing of the sword like Brock Bowers will.
And you could probably also argue that if we don't really solidify that right tackle spot, having Warren out there blocking, could also pay huge dividends as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I really wish that we brought Conklin back. I really do. I liked Conklin a lot. I was a Conklin supporter. But even if that was the case, like, I don't know if we'd be able to go back. I'm saying Bowers now. I don't know if we'd be able to go Tyler Warren at 7. It'd be, maybe a little bit more challenging. But like you got to figure he'd automatically be the best tight end on the roster that we have right now. I mean, we have Kuntz, we have Ruckert, Ruckert's in I don't think he's the guy. I really don't. Just everything I've seen of him, and then obviously Stone Smart. So with that being said, are you opposed to taking Warren at 7 or?
No, that's the way I would lean. I think right now, if I had the decision, I think the need and the value mesh very well. I think that's the kind of weapon that I would kind of put in play with Justin Fields, my quarterback, kind of that reliable red zone threat. Who gives you versatility. He can line up in line. He can line up in the slot. He can. He's a former high school quarterback. He can line up in the. He can be your push quarterback if you want. You know what I mean?
It doesn't get banned.
Yeah. So yeah, I would lean Tyler Warren right now if I was sticking and picking at 7.
Yeah, I think I would too personally. Another player I'm very interested in is Travis Hunter. He's somebody that can certainly be at if he's there at 7. I don't know if he's going to make it to 7. If he does make it to 7,
I don't think there's a chance in hell he makes it to 7.
No.
I would love it, but I don't think that's happening.
For argument's sake, if he does make it to 7 somehow, because we've seen crazier things, if these last couple of years, especially like with the quarterbacks, every team, seems to kind of get like anxiety and like, oh no, I gotta get a quarterback, So I wouldn't be surprised seeing Jackson Dart going in the top 10. But with that being, not for the Jets, God, I hope not. But with that being said, do you keep him at receiver? Do you make him a corner? Like, have you heard anything about that? Do you have him do both?
I think he can do both. I just don't know if he can do both full time. And for the Jets, I would probably play him at wide receiver. I'd probably play him I would probably play him opposite Garrett Wilson. If they didn't sign Brandon Stevens, that's a whole other conversation that you can have. Mm-hmm. But he's dynamic, man. He can do a little bit of everything. I love his ball skills on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. But I think his frame would probably hold up better as a wide receiver. He's a guy that I think could start at wide receiver and into his career, whether he makes the second contract with whatever team drafts him and whatnot. I could see him transitioning maybe to defense, but playing safety more so than corner. And that's not to say that he's a bad corner. He's my top-rated cornerback if he was a pure corner in this class. I just don't know if the scheme fit and his skill set really mesh well with what Glenn wants to do. He's not not to say that he can't succeed in man coverage, but he's not a big physical press man kind of guy. He's much more of an off man or a zone cornerback. And I have to believe that that's not going to be the physical or his physicality and scheme fit isn't going to be what Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilks want on that defense. So I'd probably play him at wide receiver if he was a Jet.
Yeah, that's a good point. There is a lot of holes on the offense. How many picks in a row personally would you keep going offense? I mean, are you like, obviously we have our players at 7 that like we certainly want. Mm-hmm. And then after that, like in your opinion, should the strategy be BPA or what do you think?
Again, if I was the GM, I'd probably in some way, shape, or fashion, I'd get out of rounds 1, 2, and 3 with a tight end, a tackle, and a wide receiver. And then day 3, which is rounds 4 through 7, mm-hmm. you can then plug away and take best, BPA. You can then plug your holes or get your depth pieces on defense. That's what I would do.
Would you be opposed to taking a quarterback in this draft? Are you a fan of every year you got to take one? We did a couple mock drafts last week, and I've been seeing a couple mock drafts where Kyle McCord's been there in the middle rounds. Are you, if he's sitting there in the 5th, 6th round, well, I don't know if he'd make it to 6, but if he's sitting there 4th, 5th round, would you pull the trigger on that, or?
Yeah, I absolutely would. I think that's great value. I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to a quarterback in this draft. I wouldn't want one early, like meaning round 1, unless listen. If Shedeur Sanders is on the board at 7, which I don't think he will be, I think he's going to be in the discussion. People don't want to talk about that as much as it is true. So yeah. Outside of that, I'd probably let some of these second round talent guys, the Darts, the Milrose of the world, I'd probably bypass them to fill what I would think are more pressing needs on the defense.
Okay.
Or the offense.
I really just wish that we knew where Jordan Travis was, health wise, because that's really like the big, like that's the big one right there. Justin Fields, the way that he plays, doesn't really have like too bad of like an injury history. I think he's been nicked up a couple of times, but other than that, like he's been pretty healthy throughout his career. Mm-hmm. If he does go down, Tyrod, he seems to get hurt every time he touches the field. But yeah, I really feel like Jordan Travis is the big one. Like I want to see what he can do at some point. So that's like the part where I've been going on record for the last couple of weeks and saying I don't even want a quarterback in this draft. None of them impressed me. Like I don't want to waste a draft pick on a project quarterback. But out of the first round, like really, that's what you're getting. If you're not getting Shedeur Sanders, who I still think is partially a very unpolished quarterback, Cam Ward's not falling to us. Let's be realistic here. So whatever quarterback it is, if we do take one, they're gonna need some work. So I really am a fan of letting a quarterback sit and develop, kind of like it was with the old days. I look at the Green Bay Packers. I think they're the perfect example. What they did with Aaron Rodgers, what they did with Jordan Love. I think that's the way to do it. But with that being said, I don't think I'd take a quarterback in this draft. So getting into like round 2 a little bit here, depending on like who's on the board, like is there like a specific guy that you want that you think is realistic in round 2 on offense?
I guess it really depends on what happens in round 1. In a hypothetical situation, if you wanted to say that it's Tyler Warren in round 1, I think that there's there's some receivers that I like in that 40 to 50 range that I really like. Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, who's a big polished 6'3", 210-pound X build that can do some work. I think Trey Harris is a good receiver out of Ole Miss, another X build, strong hands, goes up and gets the ball, really refined. Jalen Royals, who's like a Garrett Wilson clone. Mm-hmm. I think he battled some injuries this year, but came back in the Senior Bowl, showed that he was back from them. So I think that would be a phenomenal compliment. You have 2 Garrett Wilsons on the field. That's sick. So, if I was going to go, back-to-back weapons, those are kind of the guys I'd look at. Yeah. There's also the tackle class that we touched on before. There's guys like Jonah Savanea out of Arizona. There's guys like Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota, Anthony Belton out of NC State, Ozzie Trapillo out of Boston College. I think all those guys are going to be in that round 2, round 3 range, and I think that they all can, come in and at least challenge for the starting right tackle spot, if not win it outright.
Yeah, I think so too. And one of the players that you touched on was Trey Harris. I like him a lot, especially if we could find a way to get him in. I've been seeing him fall to the 3rd round. If he is there, I'm definitely pulling the trigger on that. Just diving into him a little bit deeper. What do you see out of him?
Trey Harris?
Yeah.
I mean, really good ball skills. Really, really good. He's got those, he's got like highlight reel hands. There's nothing that he can't catch. Really good hand-eye coordination, goes up and gets the ball. Definitely not as big as him as oh my God, why am I drawing blank? AJ Brown. But
right.
he's got the place. He plays like strong, like AJ Brown does. Like I see a lot of AJ Brown in Trey Harris. I think he can give you a little bit alignment versatility, right? You can line him up on the boundary as the X receiver. I think he can play inside if you ask him to. His route running or his route tree at Ole Miss was not very expansive. So, he only ran limited routes. So I think that's something that has to work on. But the guy just understands how, what his job is. So, you tie in his ridiculous catch percentage or missed or drop percentage, I should say, being so low, tied in with the IQ of how to use his body, the way he has awareness on the field, where defenders are, sideline awareness, all that stuff. It just his kind of skill sets really translate well to the NFL. So I think Trey Harris is going to be a good player.
I think so too, and I think he's an automatic starter too. Yo, what's up, Evan Explores? All right, so we have a question here from My Own Mind. Would Warren be an upgrade over Conklin? Greg, chimes in saying he would definitely be an upgrade over.
Yeah.
I think he personally would. I don't think that we ever got to see Conklin's ceiling, to be honest with you. What do you think?
I think we saw Conklin's ceiling, and listen, T. Conk was a good player, good jet, but he was just an midline NFL average kind of guy. I think that you can get more out of Tyler Warren, so I don't think it's even a comparison. I think that Tyler Warren clears T. Conk right now.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, just looking at some mock drafts that have been going over the last couple weeks, one of the positions that does seem interesting to me, and I know it really does contradict everything that we pretty much had said. There's been quite a few that I've seen Jahad Barron sitting there.
Yeah.
Safety. It is it kind of is a hole on this team. If you're looking really at the defense, it probably is the biggest hole right now.
Yeah. So Jahdae Barron out of Texas is really, really good. First off, I'll say that.
Yeah.
Very, very versatile. Like he started his career as a safety, then kind of moved inside and played slot corner before last year playing outside on the on the boundary as as an outside cornerback. So he gives you a little bit of everything. Very, very physical, very good versus the run. I think he's going to be in play for teams like, the Colts. I think he's going to be in play for teams like San Francisco. I think he's going to be in play. Maybe even the Saints, teams that are going to look for zone, very strong zone kind of corner guys that have inside outside versatility. I don't know if he'll transfer and be a full-time safety at the next level. I think he's probably going to end up playing the nickel.
Okay.
So I just don't know if that's really a fit, both scheme and positional value that the Jets are going to be looking at. But I can't tell you enough good things about Jahdae Barron. He's a top 25 guy for me. I think he's probably going to go in the top 15 for sure.
Right. Now, outside of Travis Hunter, is there any other corners that you're looking at that the Jets should draft, or do you think that maybe this is a year that we kind of get to see Stiggers a little bit more?
I don't know if you're going to see Stiggers a little bit more. I think Stiggers is going to be a depth piece. I wouldn't be surprised actually if they start converting Stiggers over to free safety, because I said that when he was coming out that that might end up being his position. Again, he wasn't drafted by this regime. He's much more fit for his own scheme. So to me, I could see him being like a continuation of Isaiah Oliver, a guy who can play safety, can play a little bit of corner, gives you some versatility in that sense, and really is a special teams stalwart. But yeah, in terms of our draft, there's tons of great corners in this class. I don't know, since we signed Stevens to a $12 million contract, I'm not sure it's going to be something of high priority, but when you're talking day 3 guys, round 4 and later, you're going to look for guys that fit the mold of what Aaron Glenn wants. And that's guys that can play physical press man, that are long and aren't afraid to get their nose, involved in the game. And there's a guy out of Cal that I really, really like. His name's Noel Williams. And he'll be a day 3 guy, round, maybe late round 3, early round 4, maybe even into late round 4. But I think he fits that bill. He's about 6'1.5", 200 pounds, super, super strong, super, super physical. Press is his forte, and can really help in run support. I think those are the kind of guys that Aaron Glenn's going to kind of hone in on.
I think so too. And to be honest with you, I really hate that Stevens contract. I don't trust him. I don't think he's a good player personally. I have a lot of concerns with him. I really do. He gave up almost 1,000 yards last year, which really is a lot.
Yeah, well, like I think the again, I think it kind of plays into what the Jets new front office and new regime are looking at. They saw Brandon Stevens, and they thought that his skill set wasn't being utilized. Again, he's that kind of corner. His forte is really press man.
Right.
And, he was asked to play a lot of off. He was asked to play a lot of cover 3 last year. And, it just didn't resonate. I'm not trying to, defend him. He had a bad year.
Right.
I get it. But they see something in him. And this is where I think Aaron Glenn's going to kind of, either make it or break it as a Jets coach. If he can kind of coach a guy like Brandon Stevens up to get the most out of him, then you'll know that we have something that we can work with as coaching staff.
Yeah, I would love to eat my words on that. I'd like to be sitting here next year at this point saying I absolutely love Brandon Stevens. I was completely wrong about him. Sign him to an extension, give him $30 million. Something like that. But yeah, I mean, Aaron Glenn actually did even say that he needs some work. And I feel like if anybody could fix him, and even like Sauce, I don't think Sauce needs a ton of fixing. He had a bad year. He's another one. But his down year is still like an average corner year. But if anybody could get the most out of these guys, I do think it's Aaron Glenn. So, as a former corner himself, I do trust him, if anybody, to get the most out of these players,
Yep.
So now we have a question here from Armand, our backup. Okay. Question for Dom. What offense and defensive day 3 players should we get to know about?
I gave you one in Noel Williams. I think he's a really good fit for what Wilks and AG are going to want to do on defense. I think Jason Marshall's another long, tall, physical press cover corner. He's going to be a day 3 guy. He's a guy whose game I really, really like. On the defensive side of the ball, I think edge can come into play. Ja Joyner, he's an edge rusher out of Minnesota. He's got a good, he's good size. He's about 6'5", 270. But very versatile in the sense that, although he's still a work in progress, he's not a complete prospect yet. He's a guy who, with a year or two of really NFL coaching getting under him, I think he's a guy that can become a 3-down player. He's stout against the run. He can get at the passer right now. He's a little bit one note, like he's much more of a power rusher than he is like a skilled, bendy, twitchy guy. So I think he's got to really develop a little bit more nuance in his pass rushing. But he's a day 3 guy that that really turned a lot of heads. He had a great Senior Bowl week, and he was a guy that kind of flew under the radar until then, and now he's starting to pop off. But his film is just consistent. It's just consistent. I think that along the defensive line are going to be some guys that, you're going to have to take day 3. You're going to have to take in day 3 and hope that you develop them. If not in year 1, you hope that you develop them as pipeline guys. So those are some guys on the defensive side of the ball. Okay. Offensive side of the ball, like one of my favorite prospects in the entire draft class is Miles Frazier. He's a guard out of LSU. Right. Just like there's not a lot that he does bad. And I think he's going to be a day 3 guy, mainly because, teams are going to see him more as a fit and only, like a power gap scheme, where I think that's kind of a little bit, disingenuous. I think he's probably a little bit more nimble than what you want. I mean, at least by watching this film, but what you want to, by the stuff that's being talked about him. Right. He's hands down the best pass blocker as an interior lineman. He's strong. He reminds me a lot of J.C. Latham last year, who was the 5th overall pick or 6th overall pick coming out of Alabama, that went to Tennessee. I think he reminds me a lot of him. His nastiness, the way he finishes blocks, the way he can, use his body and leverage and torque defenders right, just kind of right into the ground. I think he's, I think he's a plus run blocker. I think he's a plus pass blocker, and he's a guy that wants to win and plays with intent. Interior line guards are guys that I'm circling in round 3.
Yeah, sign me the hell up for that, man. Like start getting some quality depth, because we see it so often where like the fall off is so significant. Like we go from like a starting player to one of these backups that really, should never see the field, but unfortunately they do. So if I'm looking at this draft class, like just kind of like the vibes I'm getting, you tell me if you feel the same way or not. Obviously it's a crapshoot. You don't know what you're getting. A lot of times we are wrong. We think a draft class is a lot weaker or a lot stronger than what it actually turns out to be. But like you had said, between like 20 and 60 is really like the meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like we're going to be, I mean, like I said, time will tell. It doesn't seem like we're going to be like walking away with potential like future Hall of Fame players, but just like a lot of those like nasty, gritty, like I want to win kind of guys. Is that kind of the same sense that you're getting?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a fair statement. And I think that's kind of like the image or the tone that Aaron Glenn clearly wants to set. So I think he's going to kind of bring in those kind of guys.
Right. So I guess just kind of wrapping it all up here. This is a very broad question, but what are your expectations for the Jets, whether it be the coaching staff and the players in 2025? Like what can you expect to see from the Jets product in 2025?
Hang on 1 second. I apologize. My
go
son's buzzing me in real quick. Give me 1 second. Sorry, Liam.
Go ahead, take your
emergency.
Time, yep, go ahead. All right. So with that being said, mute him here. There he goes. All right. Yep. All right. So we do have a question from Johnny Boy. Question for Dom C.
My bad,
dude. To answer it. No problem. Everything all right?
Yeah, no. My son was looking to get picked up from practice, and he thought I was coming. I just want to make sure he knew elsewhere. So I apologize.
No problem. No problem. Just want to make sure everything was good.
Yeah.
No crazy breaking news on the show. But just so we do have a question from Johnny. We'll get to that after. I just want to know, like, what are your thoughts on the Jets' product overall in 2025? Your expectations?
Very low. Very low. I don't expect us to be 3-14 or anything like that. My expectation is that, they're going to build they're going to find guys that fit the mode and the model that they want to play with. And that's going to be guys that are physical, no nonsense, and are kind of built to win. I don't know if a lot of those wins are going to come in 2025. Just because, like I said, I think the roster is 2 years away. So my expectations are that we get my hopes are that we find a really good coaching staff. We find guys, not just Aaron Glenn, but the subsequent, complementary coaches, because I think that's what really hurt us through the past regime. The offensive line coach stunk. The tight end coach stunk. They had a revolving door at other positional coaches, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So let's get some of these guys in here. Let's establish a culture and really and go from there. And let's chalk. I'm ready to chalk 2025 up to learning and grinding and get ready to really, really take off in 2026.
Can't believe you just said you weren't a Ron Middleton fan.
He stunk, man. He stunk.
Outside of just being like a great talker, hit him. You know, like that's really all he had to him. But you know, like a lot of times, like we would always say, because like there was a couple years where we were getting blown out left and right. A lot of times we were saying that we'd be cool, especially like with a young regime, like with competitive losses, you know, like you just can't close it in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen so much of that last year. How many times did Aaron Rodgers, you know, like go down, score that touchdown? We give the ball right back, and the other team just marches right down the defense's throat. We've seen it week after week after week, or, you know, like we blow it in overtime. That I just can't stomach that anymore, man. But we do actually have some breaking news. Did you know that you were damn good?
Hey, I'll take it. I appreciate it, Armand.
All right, so Johnny Boy has a question for us. Question for Dom C. Who are some good wide receivers we can get in the 3rd to 4th round-ish that could fight for the wide receiver 2 position? Can't even talk tonight. Yeah. I feel like you kind of touched on this already, but maybe just do.
Yeah, well, Jalen Royals is like one of those guys I think is like round 3 that I think he can step in and play big minutes. And really be effective. After that, there's other guys. There's all different types of receivers. Like I said, it's not the best receiver class. I mean, I'm going to call it what it is. But it depends what they're looking for, right? If you want, again, I know we have Corley on the roster. We don't know what he is yet. So, but if you wanted to get like more of a slot specific guy, there's guys like, Jalen Knoll, who's more of that short area quickness, shifty, good in contact, plays through contact a lot. There's Ty Felton, who's a little bit more of a vertical slot. He's 6'2", 185 burner. Can run that slot fades and really, stretch the defense. Torrey Horton, who's a guy who I really like. I think he's he's an X, but I think he could play all over the field. He's definitely going to be a day 3 guy just because for the past 2 years, he just hasn't stayed healthy. But if he was healthy, he comes out last year, he's the top 60 pick without a doubt.
Yeah. And like you said, if he could find a way to stay healthy, then maybe we do have something. Now, Johnny has another question. He's going to be firing them off very rapidly.
That's okay.
Brian from Illinois. What are your thoughts?
Not my favorite prospect, if I'm being honest, Johnny Boy. I get it. He's physically a very good complement to Garrett Wilson. But he's not much of an athlete. He's a plotter. I question how he's going to be able to create separation at the next level. To me, you're looking at a guy whose ceiling is like, Kenny Golladay as a giant, who's just like a big old plotter. And or I should say, that's probably what he'll end up as. He'll have a ceiling of being like, Michael Thomas. And, I say that very, very respectfully because Michael Thomas for a short stretch of time was really, really good. But as he got older, he lost even more of a step and the ability to separate was just long gone. And I think you see a lot of that in Pat Bryant's film. I
think so too.
Yeah.
Thoughts on us potentially drafting a kicker?
I want nothing fucking to do with drafting a kicker. That seems to be my MO. My guess is Johnny Boy's just busting balls because everyone knows that I think it's such a wasted pick to take a kicker, but that's just me.
You know who's out there that like I really do like is Nick Folk. If you could find a way to bring Nick Folk home, I would absolutely do it. That's my personal opinion. I mean, anything has got to be an upgrade over Zuerlein.
Well, listen, I mean, there's going to be tons of guys who you can bring in and challenge and so on and so forth. We have guys on the practice squad. We got Zuerlein. There's going to be 3 other guys like you talked about, like Nick Folk and so on and so forth. So I just don't see the point in bringing in a kicker.
Afram has a question here. If there isn't a wide receiver that's worth picking, would you consider getting another tight end who can catch instead, even if you take Warren at pick 7?
I still think you need to add to the wide receiver room. It's just there's just not enough like NFL bodies right now in the room. But that wouldn't, really shy me away from taking another tight end. If you're going to double dip in a draft class, this is the one to do it.
Right. All right. So just wrapping up here. If anybody has any more questions, just definitely throw them in the chat as we get ready to wrap up here. In the meantime, Dom, you do amazing work. I mean that. You really do.
Thanks, brother.
Where could people find you if they don't know where to find you already?
Yeah, so I'm part of the Talking Jets network. I do a show on Monday nights with Ryan, just draft related.
Yep.
We actually last week we had I was able to get a real cool kid, Dre Keaton, who is a draft prospect out of Temple. We came on and we interviewed him and chopped it up with him a little bit. You can always catch me on Thursday nights with Green Bean. I'm talking, the Thursday thick of it. And, I do a lot of, I'm writing now. I do a lot of writing and draft content for the Right Way Sports Network. Mm-hmm. So you can see all that stuff and all those links to the articles I write about. I do, right now I'm doing all draft content, but I will be doing some Jets content during the season as well for them. So if you're interested in articles and stuff like that, you can find me everywhere.
It really is your busy time of year.
Yeah.
I think it was so cool that you're able to get like a draft prospect on. Like that doesn't happen often. A lot of players are advised, I believe, not to do so. It could hurt, possibly their stock, where they're, what they say and everything.
Yeah.
But I think you guys handled it awesomely. I really think they hit the ball out of the park with the park out of the park.
I appreciate it. There's a lot more of those to come before the draft too. So.
Oh really?
Yeah. Keep your eyes peeled, brother.
Yes, sir. One more from Johnny Boy. I'm gonna get ready to wrap it up. Last question here. Question for Dom C. Thoughts on a potential trade for Breece and potentially Quinnen?
I'm not trading either of them, and here's why. Quinnen, I think, is a foundational piece of this team. I think he's one of the guys that you want to that you want to build the foundation around. And the Jets have too many holes right now.
Mm-hmm.
So trading guys that are starters, that are young, to just create another hole to get a draft pick that you hope to find a guy that can kind of develop into the player that these guys are, really, to me, doesn't make sense. So I don't know if I'm signing Breece to a second deal, but I'm definitely probably not trading either of them.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. That's kind of been like a big thing going around on this channel. Some guys have been really campaigning to trade Quinnen. I'm not really in that boat.
Yeah.
Dan did sell me on it, though. Like, Dan made some really good points, actually, believe it or not. So, all right. Last question. We mean it this time. How badass are our Mets right now?
Big Meat Pete.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Listen, I don't get too emotional one way or the other 6 games into a 162 game season. So talk to me in August, Johnny Boy, and then we'll really see where the Mets are.
I agree with that 100%. But all right, Dom, it has been a pleasure as always. We got to do this a lot more than just once a year, man. I feel, it is what it is. But
yeah,
I'll get you back on for sure.
Yeah, just shoot me DM. We'll make it happen, brother. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you having me on and spending time with me, bro.
Yeah, of course. So everybody go give Dom C a follow. Go check out all of his YouTube content that he had listed a little while ago. Like Afram said, you really are everywhere this time of year. It's your busy season.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows to go to Dom C for draft content. You're definitely the guy. But you're not just draft content. You're all year long. You're talking Jets all year. Very knowledgeable and really all facets of the New York Jets and football. So you're definitely worth the follow. You're worth watching. One of my personal favorites. So
I appreciate it, Liam.
All right, man. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Jets Afterburners podcast. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't done so already. We're going to be bringing on a lot more great guests in the near future. That being said, thank you guys so much. We'll talk Jets soon.
Quarterback, Ken O'Brien of California Davis.
Just 14 that first time, now going long. They got a wide open man, and he makes the catch. It's Braylon Edwards taking off. Braylon Edwards will take it home for the touchdown. 80.
First down in San Diego territory at the 47-yard line. Big draw. And Pennington going for 6. Deep down the field, and it's